makes no sense. This ain't exactly your eye for an eye justice, Mike. Michael shook his head sadly. Fredo, he whispered, I'm not saying I didn't fuck up, because I did. Fredo was still bleeding, but slower now. Those fellas I gave that information to, Roth and Ola and them, I told them things not knowing how they'd use it, but to be honest with you, what did I tell them that amounted to anything? When you'd be at home? Christ. There was only one road into and out of your place in Tahoe. A goddamn babuino could have figured out when you were home. So when they tried to kill you, how was it my fault? As for the other things I told them that might have helped bring about peace, I understand it was wrong to go against the family on that. But it's also true everything that happened would have happened anyhow, with or without me. Right? You know I'm right. None of it hurt the organization, made it any less strong than it was. On top of which, everybody outside the family who knew about what I did, dead. You had them taken care of. Every last one. The only living people who know about it are you, Hagen, and Neary. And you're always talking about how you'd trust them two with your life. So they're no problem, right? There's Nick Geraci. Awake, Michael wouldn't have said the vanished traitor's name aloud. Fredo slapped the palm of his hand against his forehead. Blood sprayed everywhere. Right. I think of him as dead, but you're right. I will avenge your death. You have my word. That's comical. He pointed to his wounded head. Al pulled the trigger. You gave the order. You gave the order to kill Nick, too. You tried to sacrifice him, like in chess, like losing a knight or a bishop to cover up what's really going on. Except in chess, the bishop don't have no chance of swimming away from the discard pile and back on the board, changing its colors and coming after you. So sure, kill him. What choice do you have? The bleeding from Fredo's wound seemed finally to have stopped. He was drenched in blood. He whispered something to the naked woman, and she nodded, but kept crying. At the time you did this, Fredo said to Michael, neither one of us knew that Nick was behind it. You were certain you'd killed off everybody who knew what I'd done. What I want to know, he said, is who you thought would have held it against you if you hadn't have killed me. Who'd have thought you were weak for showing me some mercy? Name one person. Fredo, I'm not angry, Mike. Far from it. What happened to me was my destiny and all that stuff Pop liked to talk about. On the other hand, and forgive me for saying this, it's hard to imagine that Pop, under the same circumstances, would have had me killed, you know? Look, what I'm trying to do is understand what's in your head. I know what's in your heart, okay? Your heart's obvious. But what goes on in your head, I gotta say, it's a mystery to me. Hagen, Michael thought. With a pang of clarity, he realized that Tom Hagen, his consigliere, had been the reason he'd done it. That's who'd have held it against him. Hagen, who both was and wasn't his brother, who was but wasn't exactly family, who wasn't even Italian and therefore, strictly speaking, shouldn't know anything. And he knew everything. Tom Hagen was the link to Vito, the old man. It was Tom who kept the lines of communication open during the years Michael was in youthful revolt against his father and everything his father stood for. Hagen's job was to give Michael advice when asked, to resolve certain situations when dispatched, and he did so with great skill and greater obedience. Yet until now it had never clicked that it was Hagen's disapproval Michael most dreaded. Hagen's intelligence Michael most needed to one-up. Hagen's deceptive toughness Michael most needed to surpass, even if doing so meant going against his own nature, his own blood. After Michael and Fredo's last embrace, what had Fredo done? He'd put on his lucky fishing hat and gone to teach Michael's son Anthony to fish. And what had Michael done? He'd gone straight to his office. To do business, yes, but also to bust Tom's balls about his loyalty, which was never in question, and his mistress, which meant nothing, just to put him on the defensive. Why? So that Tom couldn't question him in the matter of Hyman Roth? No. It was about that long look toward Fredo and Anthony that Tom had taken as he'd walked into the room. About Michael's fear that Tom would disapprove. This insight flowed through Michael Corleone like a deep breath. Yet he couldn't quite speak the answer to his bloodied brother's question. No. You tell me, Fredo, since it's so obvious. What is in my heart? Oh, boy, Fredo said. The naked woman shrank away from Fredo, ducked her head, and turned around a little, now clearly embarrassed. That's your problem in a nutshell, Mike, ain't it? You don't know your own heart. Michael folded his arms. He wanted to embrace his brother and tell him he was right about everything. But he couldn't bring himself to do it. Are you finished, Fredo? Because I have business I need to take care of. Michael struggled to remember specifically what the business was. Someone else's problems, no doubt. The particulars of his day's work now seemed strewn about in his head and just out of reach. The rump of that raven-haired woman suddenly struck Michael Corleone as the most beautiful sight he had ever seen. He imagined himself running his tongue along the curve of her wide and perfect hips. He shivered. He forced himself to avert his eyes. At the end of the block, the old train roared by, boxcars filled with the nameless dead. I have a warning for you, Fredo shouted over the train. But what's the point? You wouldn't listen to me, would you? Coming from me, you'd think it was a joke. You'd think it was bullshit. You'd never give it a second goddamn thought. You never give me a second goddamn thought, I bet. Fredo was mistaken. Michael thought about him all the time. He'd been wrong about Fredo. Michael had made betrayers out of other allies. Sally Tessio, Nick Geraci, on and on. Fredo wasn't the only one, and he was probably the least valuable one. But it was Fredo who haunted Michael most. You were dead to me when you were still alive, Fredo, Michael was horrified to hear himself say. You think being dead changes anything? Nothing has changed. Go away, Fredo. Michael didn't mean a word of it. He wanted to hear the warning, truly he did. Not that it stood to be a surprise. There was the matter of the Boquicchios, that nearly extinct revenge-mad clan who supposedly did not blame the Corleones for the death of Carmine Marino, a Boquicchio cousin. There was the matter of Nick Geraci, the former Corleone capo, who had conspired with the late dons of the Cleveland and Chicago outfits to trick Michael into killing his friend Hyman Roth and just